time.
Yeah.
Happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Primetime Crime Live. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon, along with my favorite lawyer, Jarrett Ferrantino. Hi, Jarrett.
Hey, Lauren. How are you? Hello, everyone. Great to be back and live.
Yes, I've been better. I'm a little under the weather, a little, just like I guess it's the rundown feeling as well. It's nothing you can do about it. Antibiotics help. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Sal. Hi, Dad. But yeah, it's all good. It happens, and it just so happens that it's a crazy time for trials at this very moment. I mean, there is so much going on, and with cases, there seems to be new arrests and indictments every day, right?
It's hard to keep track. And I was stuck in a civil trial. What a snore fest for lawyers, but a little different world, but happy to be back in a courtroom. So like I'm trying to like crash and learn what's happening in all the cases we've covered. So I'm excited to kind of get back into them and
I
see where
know.
we're at and where we're going. And but I'm happy to see some of the predictions and things we've talked about and anticipated have come true too. So
Yeah, definitely. We'll get to that. And it's funny because I didn't include some of the cases that I'm following personally. I am very attached to the Leilani Simon murder trial, not for Leilani, for Quentin Simon. He is the sweetest, cutest little boy who lost his life 2 years ago. His mother is on trial for his murder. She allegedly beat him to death with an object and dumped his body in a dumpster. And then that was later disposed to a landfill. And it's just incredible that law enforcement was actually able to locate his remains. I mean, how rare is that, right?
well, I've had a lot of cases.
Oh, he froze. You know what? You just froze.
I
And you
froze.
froze.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. You froze in a funny face too. What were you
Sorry.
saying?
Oh, boy. I said I've had a lot of cases where bodies or evidence being dumped in a landfill or in a dumpster led us to a landfill. And the Lalani case, although I'm not following it as closely as you are, I've prosecuted too many cases like that. I never in my career thought I would be prosecuting baby killers. I did. And I went on a run for a couple of years where it was just one after another and they tear you apart. Let me tell you. I mean, I'm still they do permanent damage. Let's say that.
Yeah.
And at the time, like you, well, I was having, but my wife was having the babies, but we were having babies, and
Yeah.
you're at baby autopsies and stuff. It was awful. It was an awful time, but we were successful in the prosecution. So there's that.
I can't even imagine. And I said, I'm having such a hard time with the Leilani Simon trial. Quentin is so cute. You're just like, what? And some of this testimony, it breaks your heart just to know how he was treated and how really it seems like the only people that loved him were his babysitters, which is nice to know that he actually did get love and affection from somebody. But anyway, that is not on the docket tonight. Baby killers, not on the docket. So I was communicating with Susan Hendricks, who has been at the Delphi trial. If you watch this show, we interviewed her previously. She wrote a book, Down the Hill. She actually is having dinner with Libby's family tonight. So she was like, I would have come on with you guys and given you an update any other night, but just not tonight. So I know that you have followed this trial from the start. And I know that on Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of different reactions and they are mixed, Jarrett. So just give me your thoughts thus far
Well,
until
so
today.
my reaction is mixed. Let me say the trial is trotting out methodically. It began with the discovery of Abby and Libby's bodies, a little background as to how they found their way onto the Monon Bridge, how all that came to be on February 13th, 2017. A lot of pain, a lot of disturbing photographs being shown, but there's really no way to pleasantly tell this story. Descriptions about how articles of clothing were found. And there's this slow rollout, none of which is pointing the finger at Richard Allen at that time. You're just setting the table. And that's a good way to start. You're just talking about the discovery of you have two little girls that go into the woods and they're lost, like every horrible fairy tale. Then you have the discovery. Then you have the condition of their bodies. They were clearly murdered. Then you have this investigation that went on for a period of years. And major pieces of evidence in that case, as everybody knows, is the bridge guy's cell phone recording that the girls made when they were on the bridge before they vanished. So now, today has been a pretty powerful day. There was the ultimate revelation of the 43-second total video of Bridge Guy and the recordings that were made. There was the testimony of the witness that actually said she saw Bridge Guy, doesn't say it's Richard Allen, sees who she identifies as Bridge Guy, consistent with the first photo. She initially reported that he was covered in mud. Her statement, according to the defense and by her own admission, evolved from, she said she told investigators he was covered in blood as well. That did not appear in her original statement that they wrote down. So basically you have how somebody matching Bridge Guy's description and kind of the size and shape of Richard Allen, but the description that's been given by witnesses who were also on the bridge describes someone who's muscular, athletic, and a little younger. Okay. Now, I don't. Now, the prosecution is continuing to put this case on. So this is a snapshot. We are probably a quarter of the way there. Okay. We're on the bridge. We got to a guy looking like Bridge Guy. We have a description. We're still not at Richard Allen. And that's how the investigation flowed. So the prosecution is presenting this case chronologically. We also had the testimony of the forensic pathologist who said Libby was cut 4 times in the neck. Abby was cut 1 time. Abby was found in Libby's clothes. Libby was found unclothed. She remarked that there was no evidence of sexual assault. It does not mean there was not some form of or sexual component to the case either. So that's pretty much where we're at. There was a phone extraction and the investigator did a great job. I think one thing that was put on very powerfully and concisely was the timeline because it's extracted from the cell phone. But other than that, these defense attorneys have given these DAs a tough time at every pass. And we predicted it when Susan was on that the Odinism was going to find its way back into that courtroom. Don't you know it today? They filed a motion based on some of what the state's witnesses have already said. The door is open for an Odinism defense. And they asked today, I believe today, that motion may have been filed late yesterday, but they've asked for the judge to reconsider the barring of that evidence. So this case is proceeding as expected, but no one is directly at Richard Allen as I see it yet. And I can't see our comments. The folks that are following it, it's shaky. It's shaky. And the defense is saying, you're describing this person in 2 different ways. Your statements are inconsistent. Not that that doesn't happen in cases. It does. But I'm waiting for the case against Richard Allen to begin. There's a ballistics component to the case where they matched up the discharged bullet. The girls weren't shot. There was a bullet that was racked and discharged, they believe, found with the bodies. They talked about the positioning of the sticks that an Odinistic lore would be considered runes. So everything is out there and floating out there. I'm waiting for that moment where they start to tie it together and target Richard Allen. It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So just some people in the chat like Sal and Kevin Richardson, who maybe haven't been following this case from the start. Can you define Odinism? It's a weird defense.
So Odinism is like, I believe, a Viking occult concept. It's a religious concept, a religious occult concept where here are the, I could tell you this without getting into all of the
paganism is what it says.
Right. It's a form of paganism, but here is why there is a branch of that paganism, Odinistic group in that area.
Mm,
The February 14th date is a pagan holiday. The ritualistic sacrifice of young girls is a pagan legend.
mm.
The nature they were killed, the manner in which their bodies were posed, the fact that there were runes, the fact that they were in the woods, all of those things. And we talked at length with this with Susan, in the defense's mind, point to this as a ritualistic killing. And they actually offered an expert who testified for several hours
Yeah.
saying all of those aspects that I hit on would suggest to her as an expert in the field, it was a ritualistic killing. My position,
Right.
and Susan said, she said, look, could these sticks have been posed to look like antlers or runes? Maybe. Could sticks have been thrown over the bodies in an effort to conceal the bodies? Here's my bigger concern, not
Okay.
necessarily the details of Odinism. The
Okay.
fact of the matter is, Odinism exists. There
Mhm.
is a plausible theory for the defense to make that theory. And thus far, the judge has barred them from allowing that evidence in or allowing them to make that argument. To me, that's a huge appeal issue. The defense filed a very
Agreed.
thick motion with a lot of information and put forth a good expert witness. Doesn't mean I believe her, just means it's a tolerable defense claim. It's possible. And the investigators looked into this theory. Why
Yeah.
can't they pursue that defense? And it's the DA's job. If it's such bullshit, then knock it to hell. That's your job. That's
Yeah.
what you got to do. I don't like the fact that that's barred. I hope the judge hears, and
Yeah.
it's a better time to make the request now because the judge is in a better position. They've heard more evidence. The jury's heard more evidence. Whether or not the door's open yet, I don't know.
And I don't mean to tie everything back to the Menendez brothers, my latest
Oh
case
boy.
session. No, I'm just saying, but look what happens when you don't allow
Exactly.
defendants to use a defense how many years later. I mean, it's tough. And I think today there was also some, I guess there was some talk on the witness stand with the police sergeant, Christopher Cecil. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. He testified that the month after Allen's arrest, he had found nothing tying Richard Allen to their deaths.
None of
He didn't
his
find
cell
anything on
phones,
his
none of
on his cell phone. So that's not.
Look, I had said, and if anybody, any of our viewers and listeners get a chance, we did a Crime Nation special on the Delphi case last year. And my assessment of the case against Richard Allen
Mm,
was that it wasn't the greatest. They're really pinning their hopes on Richard Allen's confessions, which came later when he's in prison. And the defense's position is this guy was going bonkos at that point.
yes,
He was losing it.
I have to agree. Don't you?
Yeah, if you're look at that point, he was arrested and charged. If you're waiting for him to confess while he's in custody, and that's the best piece of evidence you got, that's a problem. But again, it's hard. But you know what, Lauren? I hate to. It's hard for me to sit here and cast such a negative opinion on the DA's case because we haven't seen everything they have
Sure.
thus far.
Sure.
I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see ultimately presented against Richard Allen. I'm hoping they'll get there. But it's weird that he was not following the case at all on his devices. That's
Right?
strange.
Right.
And,
I mean, it
yeah.
is. It is. And you know, I think the Indie Star is also doing a great job of covering this, and that's who I look to pretty much at the end of the day. And they include these details just about Richard's reactions, and I guess his reaction to the sergeant testifying and not linking him to anything. They described him as having this bitter smile, and I don't know what a bitter smile would be other than smug, if you will. I don't. It's
Well,
pretty.
I think the smile's in the eye of the beholder. Like a bitter smile is probably like shaking
You
his
think so?
head.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
actually better. Okay, okay, do that again. Sorry,
yeah. It'd be like
bitter
that's a
smile.
bitter smile.
Yeah,
It's like frustration, sarcasm.
yeah.
You're an idiot. I'm sitting here because of that. That's from Richard's perspective, of
Yes,
course. So,
totally, totally. And Sue, this is kind of I hate even saying this. And Kevin, I think you said this as well. It's the brutal end of Two Beautiful Lies, but like at this point, you have to feel so horrible because like you said, I know they have not presented their full case yet. They still have some time, but it's tough. It's really
Well,
tough.
and the other concern too is,
Yeah.
the prosecution gets to show, and I've done it 1,000 times if I've done
Mm,
it once, they get to show these brutal pictures of a
mm,
victim, horrible pictures. They break the jury's heart. I would stand up before I show those pictures and I'd announce in the courtroom just to create the drama. Ladies and gentlemen, I am about to put pictures of, Abby or Libby up on the screen. If
mm.
anyone feels they need to leave, you need to leave now, and I will give you the time. And that just creates a tone like everybody knows, oh shit, it's coming, right?
Right.
Once those
Yeah.
pictures are laid out, this case has been like an atomic bomb on that community.
Mm.
And what they're looking for, what oftentimes happen is you see these pictures, these young beautiful lives that were destroyed, they were
Yeah.
brutalized, they were abandoned in that woods. And do you now look to the defense chair and want to convict whoever's sitting there? And is that the temptation? That's the fear. You
It
know,
is, and you feel so bad for the family because they're sitting there and how can you not believe that this is the guy and I'm not talking about us. I'm not talking about everyone in the chat that's following this. I'm talking about the family. You want to trust the cops. You want to trust the DA. They arrest a guy, you're going to trust, well, it's probably the guy if they arrested him and they have seemingly all of this evidence. And that's what's so hard about this case, in my opinion, Jarrett, in my
and
opinion.
they've been, and look, they had a face, the original bridge guy drawing, and then the
Yeah.
second bridge guy drawing. By the way, the judge kept those two drawings out, which I also think is wrong.
Oh, I
So,
didn't realize that.
oh
I did
yeah,
not
at this
realize
point
that.
they're out. That door is going to be opened. I don't know how you get around that. But again, I don't like that. That to me, there's certain when we talk about Sarah Boone, we're going to talk about earning the right to present certain defenses. Okay,
Mhm.
but in this case, you have one side who's allowed to show all these horrible pictures and all this stuff that that is not salacious, but certainly prejudicial, but it has evidentiary value. And then another side that has put forward an expert, that has put forward that litany of items that are consistent with Odinism, and they're barred from presenting that evidence. And there was a
You to
tie into
say
the
that
girl.
as a prosecutor, Jarrett, that's kind of a big deal, I feel like, because like you were on the other side. So I feel like for you to say that, I mean, it's something. It might be.
I'm frustrated because I would tell you this in the back of my mind. All right, yeah, you want to get the win, and yeah, you may feel good you kept that defense out in the short run, but you
Mhm.
know something? In the back of my mind, I would be haunted by the appeal issue and knowing full well this may come back on that issue.
That's what I'm thinking. And this is what Sue said in the chat. Where is the DNA?
Right. It's not there. What's another? So, Sue, we talk like, and I would say this: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? You don't have DNA. It was
I'm
outside.
like,
But one of the things they talked about was there was a two, not one, two
mm,
bloodletting events when Abby's throat was slashed and when Libby's throat was slashed. They talked about the pathologist who did in excess of 7,000. I love when they say that, how many bodies they examined, but 7,000
yeah.
autopsies over the course of their career. They talked about this being just a sanguine bloodletting event where blood
Mm,
would be projected out, okay, because
yeah.
it's pumping there, and that it would have taken the girls 6 to 14 minutes, I think the numbers were, to die, mentally die. I think they would have been
Right.
passed out losing that blood. But
Oh,
here's the thing, that bloodletting, I've had cases where throats were slashed, um,
mm,
pools of blood, blood spatter, blood transfer, um, onto the defendant's clothing, onto areas at or near the bodies.
mhm.
Bridge guy may have been covered in blood and mud. Um, why you don't have his DNA, his hair? There was a claim that there was hair found in one of the girl's hands, and I apologize, I don't know the specifics of this, but
Yeah.
hair did not match Richard Allen. It's safe to say. So
I
there is
do. Yes. That's but we don't know whose hair it was
no.
necessarily. It could have been her own hair, right? It could have been.
Well, they would have tested it against that. So that would have been a known sample originally that it would have been tested against. So who knows where it came
Yeah.
from. I mean, who knows? The bottom line is this is not the strongest case I've seen. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing witnesses that are shaken or shakeable. I'm seeing witnesses that are acknowledging things that the defense are giving them. Um, but I'm hopeful, and no one has heard Richard Allen's confessions really to date. There's been reference to them.
No, no.
If he says things that uh, would suggest that in fact he did it, other than I did it. I mean, things of uh, I don't know, details of the crime, things of that nature. I'm anxiously awaiting those recordings and those statements.
Yes, and for Sal, he just said, "Doesn't a judge ruling to withhold evidence interfere with the rules of discovery?" Well, no, a judge has the final say over what can be admitted
Well,
into the
so
case.
what was doesn't the ruling?
He means
Well,
the defense. It's not discovery necessarily, right? It's their actual
it's two
defense.
different things.
Yeah.
So good question. That means that discovery is the phase where everything is shared. I hope I'm not insulting everyone by describing these things, but some people don't know these things. Basically, the prosecution has to give their entire file to the defense. That's the discovery process,
Mhm.
okay? Unless there's a particular piece of evidence that has to remain confidential, like the name of an informant or something, up
Right.
until the time of trial. Okay, so that is given to them. That does not mean, and I just had an issue in a case like this, like a lawyer was trying to get a piece of evidence in, and they're like, it's in discovery. I was like, well, that doesn't make it admissible. So the fact
Yeah.
that it's in the file doesn't mean it is relevant and probative ultimately in the
Right.
case. So it's what Hermit Sal is asking about are two evidentiary concepts. Yes, they're given, doesn't mean they're ultimately going to be admissible at the time of trial.
Mm, okay. Yeah. And Kevin said, "Do we think that the mobile phone data might show the bridge guy was at the scene?" And I'm going to go ahead and say that from what I've gathered, the sergeant, who is actually a former digital forensic expert at the Indiana State Police, he seemed to not have great explanations about the text messages coming in. And to my knowledge, the only evidence that Richard Allen was on the bridge was him calling the police or something like that. So that was a bit confusing to me. I was just like, so I don't.
So
It's
they don't have his device from that time. They
right.
have all his subsequent devices. They don't, well, all. They have many of his subsequent devices. So his phone in February 17 has not been analyzed, because you remember it was 5 years to when they got him. I don't know what the phone I had 5 years ago. God only knows where it is, But
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
so there's that, and that's another thing we got to remember. Let's not forget Richard Allen puts himself at the scene. So
exactly.
he's there. Okay, we're getting there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know, I look when I see Kohlberger, and I hope this doesn't upset anybody. I see a guilty killer. Okay, when I see Richard Allen, I'm just not so sure. I'm not sold on Richard Allen yet. I don't love the guy, but I just
Mhm.
need to hear more at this point.
I have to agree with you, but I just feel so bad for the family. I just and you're not alone in your thinking. There really is a lot of doubt from people following this and people that are experts following this. So it's a tough one.
Hey,
But
we're experts,
yeah, I mean additional experts.
right?
Like yeah, everybody seems to be sharing some of the same sentiments here. So again, I think that we can do another update on this next week or the next as the trial progresses. But one
Definitely,
case,
though, if you're not up on your Delphi stuff, check out that 2 hour special. They did a really nice job of talking about the girls, their lives, and the case up until the point where they got Richard Allen. So
yes,
you'd be up to date.
yep, absolutely. So this case, in my opinion, the next case, Sarah Boone. This is not a super complicated case, in my opinion. This is another infuriating case. Very
It's an
infuriating.
open and shut case. Pardon the pun,
No,
right?
I mean, I had been tweeting about this. I had this on in the background today while I was just doing other things. And there were certain times that I was like, wait, did I just hear that? Did I just hear what I think I heard? I mean, for example, this psychologist was up there testifying and Sarah Boone, I mean, she reminds me of Leilani Simon in the sense that her story has changed so many times between her initial interview with police, to even when she was actually just talking outside of her apartment complex on body cam footage. I mean, it's incredible. And I really applaud Winter Park, Florida, and the police department for just all of their work on this case. I mean, I feel like a lot of the time we don't get all of this body cam footage, and we don't get to see all of this and all of these interviews, but she pisses me off. I mean, she's
This
talking
is
about how he's threatening her from the suitcase so she didn't let him out. I'm like,
it's the longest guilty plea ever, this trial. That's
oh,
that's what it is.
what a
Let me
waste of
tell you,
money.
so obviously her statements weren't consistent with her defense.
Yeah.
Her first three lawyers had an entirely different defense. They were claiming this was an accident and that they were horsing around.
He
Now,
fell asleep.
Sarah
Oh
Boone's
no. Yeah.
position, for those of you that aren't familiar with the case, Sarah Boone's somehow gets her boyfriend into this suitcase there, that it may have began as what he believed was horsing around.
Yes,
He
I
couldn't get
believe that
out.
actually. I believe
She,
that part.
she videotaped, they're boozed up. She videotapes him begging to let her out of a suitcase. He was a slight guy, he was small. He fit into an actual suitcase. The thing gets zipped shut. He cannot get out. He clearly can't get out. One of the big issues in the trial so far was whether or not Sarah had seen that the zippers were far enough apart for him to slip his hand outside of the suitcase. She claimed he was doing that and he could have opened the suitcase up.
Yeah,
She had
said
moved that thing around with him in it. She was laughing at him.
he hit
He
it
was
with a bat,
begging, hit it
Jared.
with a
He hit
bat.
it
She was
with a bat.
begging.
Like,
He was begging, and you could tell by the way he was begging, he wasn't being nasty. He wasn't trying to further upset her. He was
no.
trying to convince her to let him out.
Right. And that video right there, I mean, that's her nail in the coffin, because anything she's saying, well, his tone started to change with me and I started to get really upset. So I hit it with a bat, and then you sat on the couch, and it's just like, what, again, like you said, her story has changed, her defense has changed. We all saw the video. She was slurring her words, she was laughing, she did not care. Oh, this is a funny comment. As many different versions as number of lawyers. Totally agree with that. Something else that I thought, and I was talking to Dr. Rachel online. Many of you know Dr. Rachel, but she's a forensic psychologist. But the thud that her neighbor heard he said he was like Zooming with his girlfriend or something, and she even heard this thud, which led us to kind of think, well, did she throw it down the stairs or something? Like, did she? Because if you look at the details on what was released about the autopsy, I mean, he had a lot of contusions and a lot of bruising, which, at first I thought maybe he did it to himself trying to get out. But and we haven't heard any medical examiner or anybody medically testify to his injuries just yet. So we'll wait and see, but I feel like there was some damage done to him there.
I just think, how nuts is this case? I mean, think about this. Like, she's nuts, not insane. We've talked about her before. She's
Mhm.
no dummy. She's sharp. And I've said it. I've dealt with defendants like this in the past. It's a nightmare. I mean, they're brutal to represent. They're brutal to prosecute. They're the smartest person in the room. And as I said, you get on this hamster wheel of their logic, where they it's where narcissism meets genius meets homicidal maniac.
Please
Like,
don't give her genius. She's not a genius.
but
I
none,
can't
but well,
like
but
that. Yeah.
in criminal realm genius, okay, like criminal defendant realm, it's these three places they meet together, and it's not a great cocktail. And her attorney, I think, we talked about whether or not he should have been given additional time, and she's his cause célèbre now. I mean, he's buying her theory,
Yeah.
hook, line,
Yeah.
and sinker.
And it's, I listening to her on the stand and just kind of analyzing her statements were really interesting, because she does like to twist things to make herself look better. I think one of the themes we've seen here is that Sarah was so good for George. She was like, oh, call your kids, go see them.
Yeah.
He wanted to wake up and start drinking, and I wanted him to clean the house so we'd had this sense of accomplishment. Oh, but my son was coming over. Oh, but it's just, you know what I mean? She just is always like, it's all about making her look good. And I have to say, this trial upsets me in the sense that the victim shaming is awful. It is just so disrespectful. I mean,
And it's
yes,
kind of from out of nowhere. It's like she makes this claim, and this is not a shot at battered woman syndrome at all. I
I
think
already
it is.
got dragged for this. Don't worry.
But
So,
let me say, but it's not. I mean, but she didn't tell the police. She didn't tell her lawyers. This is someone who is not quiet. Okay. Sarah Boone can handle herself. She never tells investigators she's in jail for the death. She doesn't tell her first 3 rounds of lawyers, now comes up with this theory. That obviously is suspicious. Okay. There's not a logical explanation for why somebody who is as articulate as she is, who is as capable of articulating her position, fails to get self-defense and battered woman syndrome out of her mouth until she's 4 lawyers deep, year into her case, all of those things. So none of that's consistent. Do you know why it's not consistent? Because it's total bullshit. Uh,
yeah,
you know,
definitely. I mean, she said, well, first of all, she has him in the suitcase. If you're so scared, call the cops, right? Keep him in there, call the cops, whatever. The other thing she said that got me was that he stabbed her with a steak knife and she almost bled to death. And he begged her not to go to the hospital, not to call the police, but she almost bled to death. But there's no blood. If you're almost bleed to death, I'm pretty sure your apartment is going to be covered with blood. Like, right?
it
If you
w-
almost that's a
right.
lot of blood.
Well, sure, absolutely. So
Yeah.
you'd
So
have to lose a significant amount. It's not something. Look, she's completely. You let's not try to apply logic to this illogical defense.
yes, and like I said, alcohol clearly was a problem, but because you have an alcohol problem does not mean you deserve to die. And I also want to point out how stunned I was during the opening statements when the prosecution was like, George Torres was 103 pounds.
He was
Dude,
very small.
I don't I literally have 30 pounds on that guy, if not more, probably more. We'll just pretend 30 pounds, whatever. So anyway, like I'm just saying, like that, I mean, what? And again, the battered woman syndrome, I truly do. I believe all women, maybe not Amber Heard, just kidding, kind of, and Sarah Boone. And that's really like, I don't want to come off as that person. And I believe they got into arguments. I mean, I've seen police reports with the domestic violence calls that police responded to. But in my opinion, it seems like they were both at fault for all of that. So
Yeah,
that's where
there's.
I stand. Yep.
I think one of that self-defense in addition or aside from battered woman syndrome, it's a
Yeah.
tough thing for prosecutors to deal with. But I just don't see it from a man
Nope.
essentially locked in a suitcase,
Nope.
begging for
Not
his life.
You're right. And I think the dumbest thing she ever did and her lawyers. And you know what? I don't know if her lawyer just wanted, and I might regret saying this, if he just wanted his 5 minutes of fame, but why the hell would her lawyer not be like, yo, take the plea deal. You've already served 5 years. You could be out in less than 10 years, dummy. How did he not? Can you
Well,
imagine?
I would imagine that conversation took place, and he said, "Dummy, take the deal," right? But
No, I mean,
you can't and I'll tell you this too. What typically happens in that situation is that lawyer and that defendant come into court. Okay, and I'm not saying it happened in Boone, but I've been there where you say, "Look, the district attorney has made this offer to me, 10 to 20 years for this case. My client has rejected it. I want you to put on the record." I want you to ask my client, do they understand that they could be facing life? They could likely get life if they're convicted, and that if they reject this deal, it's off the table. All of that has to happen. And a lawyer may say, I've recommended they take this plea. I've reviewed the evidence.
they put
I've
it on
met with
record,
the court.
right? Yeah.
Yes. And ultimately that decision is not a lawyer's decision. It's the client's decision. I've had people confess to murder and take a trial. Who knows? Well, who knows what motivates them? I can tell you none of it went well for them.
I am waiting for the moment that they announce that she's guilty. I really am. I mean, she is going to lose her mind. I don't even I'm just thinking about this. Like
Someone
it's
say
gonna
she
be
lost her mind some time ago, but no,
well,
she's gonna
that's
blow
true.
a
I
gasket.
mean, that's true. I had just reported on her snack request when she got back to jail one night at 9. She was so specific. She wanted Pop-Tarts, 6 peppermints. It's absurd. It's literally it's the most insane thing ever. And I really do think this attorney wants his 5 minutes of fame. And look, in my opinion, he's not getting it. He's very forgettable, Jarrett. You know, there's certain defense attorneys you're like, ooh, you're on the edge of your seat. Not this guy. His
Like
name is
Kirk
Jason
Nurmi, your
Owens.
buddy,
Who?
right? Like Attorney
Kirk?
Nurmi, your buddy.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Kirk, Alan Jackson. He's really
yeah.
like, I mean,
No,
they're, you know,
I get it.
Arthur Idala, they're great. You want to watch them. They're theatrical almost. And I know that sounds horrible to say, especially when they're defending alleged murderers. So I do apologize if that sounded insensitive. But I just think that this guy, I don't think he knows what he's doing. I don't think he's doing anything special. But I'm just waiting for the guilty verdict. Really, the guilty
Remember, she
verdict.
answered an ad for this client.
Mhm.
She
Yep.
made an ad basically saying like, "You'll be famous for this." So
Yep.
that to me is
You're so right. She really did say that you're going to be famous for this.
right, right.
Yeah. So with this, let's put that to bed for now because I really could talk about her crazy antics forever. But let's go. And this is a case that is not adjudicated just yet. But Jarrett and I have been covering this, and I started to cover it back Easter weekend when it happened. But this is the case of the kidnapping and murders of Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly, 2 mothers out of the Oklahoma Panhandle. And Veronica was in a custody battle with her. Essentially, it was her baby daddy, but it was his mother who was taking care of the children at the time. So she had a court-appointed supervisor that went along with her, and they were friendly. Jillian Kelly, who was a mom of 4, both wonderful women. Veronica was a wonderful mother, and this custody battle, there's a lot of history there. I don't agree with exactly some of the details in it, but if you guys are not familiar, you can go back and listen to some of the things that happened and why she lost her kids. So, sorry, I'm just going to go back to Sue. She said, let's talk Karen Reed because we always do. That's so funny. Not tonight. No. Carrie says, no, please, Sue. But
Much more to
so,
come on.
yeah,
the
no.
Karen Reed saga.
So these women, they don't show up to the pickup point and they're reported missing. There is a manhunt and the women's bodies were found about a week later. And what was about to unfold, I don't think anybody was really ready for. I think people in town maybe had a hunch, but I don't think anybody was ready for this. And so 5 people were arrested, and it was Veronica's, just to simply put it, her mother-in-law, Tiffany Adams, her boyfriend, Tad Cullum, another one of their couple friends, Cora Twombly and Cole Twombly. And then it took about a week for police, or maybe a little more, to arrest a 5th suspect, Paul Grice. And then it comes out that they're part of this anti-government group called God's Misfits that meet regularly at people's houses. And it's horrible. So the Twombly's daughter, who is a confidential witness, she's a minor, she really helped solidify this case along with the mounting evidence that Jarrett and I have been going through for a few months now, because these filings, they just drop and then they are tragic bombshells. So we just found out, and guys, if you are not caught up, there's a playlist on Primetime Crime of Kansas moms. Go and catch up. We recently saw, and I won't go back too much further, but we recently found out who was actually responsible for the killings, and the women were stabbed, and that's all we know. It's horrible. But Paul Grice was responsible for killing Veronica, and Tad Cullum was responsible for killing Jillian Kelly. And then we saw there was charges added last week or the week prior, abuse of a corpse and unlawful desecration of a body, which means the women were found in a chest freezer. My assumption is that they mutilated the body. Cole Twombly was a butcher and owned a cattle company. So this is speculation, guys. Jared, I think you might agree. That's seemingly what it is. And then Tiffany Adams was charged with those charges. Additionally, she was charged with 2 counts of child neglect because it appears that she had her grandchildren, Veronica's young children, walking through a Tractor Supply Co. holding the ratchet straps that were going to be used to contain her mother's corpse. So if you can imagine those kids one day, or even now, really processing what what that whole situation that they were in, and how, I don't want to say they were a part of it, but I mean, think about that. That's awful. And then the last thing, and we'll get Jared's analysis because there's a lot, but we saw that there is a preliminary trial, a pre-trial, I'm sorry, in December. And Paul Grice first opted to waive his right to a speedy trial, the actual trial, and then he opted to waive his right to the pretrial. And then he switched jails. And then what followed is that Cora did the same thing, although I cannot find any information that would indicate that she changed jails at all. But I haven't dug
So I have
that
a couple
deep.
thoughts on that. I have a couple thoughts on
Yeah.
that. So as predicted, and we've said we're getting tired of being right, and
Ugh,
but
awful.
but as predicted, when you have a case against 5 co-defendants, a prosecutor wants to make a deal with 1 and or 2. And we even talked about, when looking at this case, what the motivation for a deal may be. The fact that the Twombly's daughter is the witness here is hopefully motivation for 2 individuals where you can go to them and say, your own daughter is going to be pointing the finger at you in this brutal murder trial. Come clean, the gig is up. You would hope that that would push mom Cora or dad Cole into that witness chair. It appears Cora Twombly, as we kind of anticipated, is off the island of God's misfits toys, right? With Paul, they're gone, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like the state now has, well, we could say this, as you said, and then there were 3. Now we're down to 3. And who are the 3? Paul Grice has clearly
Oh, yeah.
turned state's evidence. Cora Twombly's off now. And we're left with Tad, we're left with Tiffany,
Grandma.
and we're left with Tad, Cole, and Tiffany.
Mhm.
If anybody of that trio is to fall, it'll be Cole Twombly, and that's after his daughter and maybe Cora have an opportunity to somehow appeal to him.
I have to check. I know they were both married before they married each other, so I have to check to see if this is their daughter together, or it might be Cora's daughter, but don't quote me on that.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Something like that. Yeah.
But now here was the couple of the big questions we've been wrestling with, and certainly the courts will ultimately have to deal with is, are these cases going to be held together? Okay.
Mhm.
Now you're down to 3. The logistics of managing a 3-defendant trial, which I have done, are not easy. Okay. That's 3 defense lawyers, 3 bites at the apple at every witness,
Yeah.
but it ain't as bad as 5. So now you're down to 3. Can Tiffany, Tad, and Cole go on trial together? Now, my thought is this. I would absolutely want Tad and Tiffany on trial together. They were in a relationship. Their roles are consistent. I'm going to bet that their defenses are going to be consistent. You may have to break off Cole, but all of the evidence I've reviewed so far and the filings so far would suggest that Cole's role, at least in the commission, was somewhat limited. So, it's going to be hard to say he's not going to be somehow compromised by the roles and the level of involvement Tad and Tiffany had. Now, they're all on the hook for the crimes. So my thought is I would still push for one trial with those 3, but I could see a judge breaking them off into at least 2 separate.
Yes, and for the people in the chat that aren't familiar with this case, I want to point out that we don't know everything still. What we know from the filings is that Cora and Cole diverted their car as a distraction. There were pools of blood found, a broken hammer. And then their bodies were buried about 8 miles away in a chest freezer on this property that Tad rented. That's what we know, about 15 feet underground. So I am under the impression right now, and I saw that Tad added two more attorneys, which Jarrett pointed out could be because not every lawyer is eligible to try a death penalty case. And in
No,
Oklahoma, yeah, you could face the death penalty, and that is on the table here as far as we know. So some people had come to me personally and said, well, what kind of deal could they possibly be making, Cora and Paul? And it's like, to keep their life, they'll be in jail forever, no doubt, but death could be off the table for them. Possibly.
that's right.
We
That's
don't
right.
know. Right. So, and then my other thinking here, and this is just sort of human behavior, and I'm not a psychologist or a doctor, but it seems like Paul from the start was freaking out and was talking. He seems to be the person, I don't want to say he seemed to, here I go again, the Eric Menendez thing, where he just couldn't live with himself. He was like, I got to tell somebody. I got to tell somebody. So he tells, maybe he tells OSBI. I don't know. Tad, on the other hand, and Tiffany, and again, I don't want, this is my opinion, but they do truly seem to be just diabolical, like really
Well, and
just
Tiffany confessed to her role in it. I mean, she didn't hide it. She
right.
thinks my
Right.
suspicion is that she thinks she was justified and
Yes,
intends to
exactly.
take that defense. And Tad, if they have these anti-government beliefs and they believe they have to or are justified in taking the law into their own hands, you can bet they're going to take a trial and their defense is going to sound something like that. And we've kind of speculated what we think the defense would be wrapped. It's this self-governance wrapped in this suspicion that the children may have been inappropriately contacted by a relative of Veronica's. So
yeah,
that's where I think they're going. Where that leaves Cole, I don't know. But I cannot see Tad and Tiffany taking a deal here. I think they're going to trial.
Oh, I so agree with you. I don't think the DA's office could, yeah, no, I don't think that could ever happen. That would be, I just know if I was a family member, I would be like, absolutely not. Hell no. There needs to be a trial. And it's just, I'm
You know
thinking,
what though? Here's the thing, and I've been in that situation, and I've been in that situation where death comes off the table. Look, the death penalty, maybe people don't like to accept this, is a bargaining chip for pleas too. I mean,
yeah,
I've prosecuted those cases. Yeah, believe me, I would have been the one who wanted to string up a particular defendant myself. And then I have mixed feelings about it in different cases. But the reality is, it's often been a reason to work cases out. And if Tiffany and Tad came to me and offered a plea and avoided the unpleasantness with what they believe was their justification and avoid the family having to see the images of their loved ones in a freezer 15 feet below the surface on that Beasley farm, and avoid having to put this case in the hands of a jury, I would take the deal. I always tell people, you want to gamble, go to Bally's, go to Caesars. It's like, look, the deal would be life without the chance of parole. They sit in jail. Tiffany's not as young. I think Tad's younger than Tiffany, but these are not very young people by any
no,
stretch.
Tad's 43. The thing is,
He looks
40.
a lot older. That's
He
right.
looks like he's literally, he looks horrible. And that's the other thing. These pictures, and I can pull one up right now, but man, you have to just assume that their brains were not, they were always, according to witnesses and just sources in general, these people always, or Tiffany rather, always seem to be a bit not very nice, a bully, bossy, if you will. But the change in their appearance is so drastic. I would go as far to say, like, she was beautiful at one point. And she's 50 something, maybe 50. And like I said, Tad is 43. He looks like Santa Claus. He looks disgusting. I should just, I'll pull this up, but I don't even
I
want to
would
show
think
their
though, by the
pictures.
time of trial, you'll see they'll be all cleaned up. And I know the
You think
change is
so?
marked. Yeah, I think so. I that's what I would do. But the change in their physical appearance is a marked difference. There's no doubt. I was watching, I think you sent me something on Tiffany.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it was her. I mean, I
Well,
can't believe
I'm
it's the
gonna,
same person.
I'll pull this up. Look at them here. I mean, they actually look, they look good. Now
Wow.
let me,
Wow. That's the picture. Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, they look, I don't know what the definition of normal is anymore, but let me just,
Well, they certainly look happy. They look
right.
fit. They look, they're
Yeah,
attractive, happy people. Not what, wait, pull up the next picture.
I'm gonna pull, I'm Googling the mugshots as we speak. Uh, well, can
Yep.
you kind of
That's crazy.
crazy? So,
So point out just, so the
okay,
Twombly,
top,
okay.
my top left is Tad, and then Cora, and then bottom left is Tiffany, and then Cole.
Yeah.
So,
They look like
is
they
it,
got left on the porch all winter.
sorry.
I mean,
I
that's
mean,
rough
it's sick.
stuff.
It's
That's
horrible.
rough stuff.
So, let me just remove that. So yeah, there seems to be just like something that, besides the fact that they have issues and they are evil allegedly, they, something seems to have happened, right? And I have to just assume drugs, but let's also remember how I guess, I mean, this was obviously premeditated, but they went as far as to put kitty litter on the blood, the pools of blood. Like they seem to think that that would, what is that, trace absorption? I mean, these
Yeah.
morons, like with the cell phone pinging, like at the, literally their cell phone pinged at all the spots that they were. I mean, what are you doing, guys? It's just, it's, I don't know. I
Part of
just
me
can't
thinks,
imagine they thought
part
they'd
of
get away
me,
with it.
part of me uh, thinks that they knew damn well they were going to get caught, and they're ready for this defense and their campaign of the defense that they're going to maintain. I mean, come on, they're not stupid. That's the reality of it. They're not stupid.
They're stupid criminals. I mean, I think they're stupid criminals. Paul going around with a cut hand asking people, and this is in the documents, how he can get a man and his family to Mexico. He's asking if how long DNA lasts in dirt. Bro,
Yeah, I
really?
mean, those are conversations. I'm saying to you though, do you think for a minute they thought they were going to get away with this? I don't. I think that they're so arrogant that they didn't care. They may have foolishly believed their justification will carry the day and no jury would convict them
Okay,
because they
I'll
were.
buy that.
That's what I
I'll
think.
buy that.
And I
Okay.
think it's not stupid, it's misdirected, and it's a false belief that you can take the law into your own hands in a situation like that.
Yeah,
I know what
I'll
she's
believe
going to
that.
say. She's going to say, we trusted the courts. How many times do we go back to the courts? The gig was up. We had to take matters into our own hands. And that's our governmental belief. That's our sovereign belief. And I told you, I've had these sovereign defenses in cases in the past. I've been able to dispose of them somewhat quickly. I didn't really have to deal with them for too long, but there are people that feel very strongly. You can think what you want about it, and I can think what I want about it personally, but you cannot say that people don't believe that stuff. They do.
Right, right. And so, Sal, this is interesting because Jarrett said this as well. He said, when they come to court, they're going to be all cleaned up. They're going to be, and Sal says trials like TV shows where the actors get made up, so defendants get cleaned up for trial. Okay, maybe this is completely backwards, but if I'm a defense attorney, I kind of want my client coming in looking very pitiful. If I'm on
Well, I
trial,
think
I don't want to look like, oh, let me do my hair, let me like look beautiful. I want to look meek, timid. I want to look like crap. I want to look like I'm having a hard time in jail and I don't deserve this.
well, I think
That's
that's certainly an approach. But I think when you look at the marked difference in their appearance, like I said, they look weathered. They look like they've been through some stuff. They look like they were out exposed to the elements.
yeah.
But if you give them time to dry out in prison, if they were abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, and they do in fact dry out, by the very nature they're eating regularly and not abusing drugs or alcohol, they're going to look better. if Tad shaves, for example, he's going to look 43 years old again. Okay. All of a sudden, he doesn't look like the guy that would do this. You have very little in this case. So the
Yeah.
hope is that you can convince. Now, Tad may be a guy who feels like my beard is my badge of honor and I look like I'm a butcher and a farmer and that's what I am. So be it. I mean, because you're not, I'd imagine the jurors in Texas County aren't reading the latest issue of GQ. You know what I mean? It's just, so you got to remember the audience you're playing to here as well.
Right. Right.
So,
Well,
but I think
yeah.
that defense wants to control as much of the uncontrollable in that courtroom as they can. And if the ability to make a witness look better or their client look better, they're going to do it.
Right. And just somebody, Alf said, sovereign citizen. That's a whole other issue. Paul Grice filed this 40, or basically sent this 44-page document, literally sent it to Antony Blinken, claiming that it was just, Jared, I don't even know how to describe it. It's so bizarre. And apparently this is a common thing for these God's misfits to do, claiming they're sovereign citizens and their beliefs are their beliefs. And I think there was one part saying like his children are his sperm and the government has no say over him. It's just 44 pages of absolute nonsense. And the last thing I want to ask you about, just before we close on Diddy, is Cora's got to be in protective custody or something. If she
that's why she wouldn't. And so you made a great point. Paul was moved for his safety. Okay, but they didn't move Cora. Cora is placed with the other females. It's probably a facility that they can control her. They can have her in her own cell, she's probably in a restrictive housing unit, which is a punitive and a protective place within the prison. So you wouldn't have to move her to another prison. That's really the point.
Like, so you don't think she would see Tiffany? I don't know how jails work all the time.
They can make it so like I've had juveniles placed in adult facilities where they have to be out of the sight and sound of any other inmate. So I would imagine the Texas County Jail can accommodate keeping Tiffany and Cora out of each other's way. Be it, are they on a different floor? Are they in another unit? That doesn't mean they can't find a way to communicate with one another. You would be amazed. But
but I guess that's what I mean, where it's like, I just don't actually believe Tiffany wouldn't have a way of getting to her. That's what I'm so confused about here. And I wish I had some boots on the ground that, could go to Texas and just tell me what's going on there. Cause it really is perplexing to me.
Well, and that's an inner jail thing. I don't know that you'll ever know the true answer to that, but
can I call the jail? Will they tell me things if I call?
If you get the right person, I don't know. I mean, they're not going to give you the part. They're not going to tell you. Look, if they're required to keep them apart, they're certainly not going to tell you, hey, they can communicate through the toilet.
Sorry, no.
Which they could.
Okay. No, I totally get that. I guess I just mean like I want to know scheduling, or do you have, do all jails have solitary? Do all jails have protective custody?
Well, there's probably a handbook. There's a prisoner's handbook you could probably get from them too.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
And it may be on the website. If not, the handbook will lay out with that facility.
I'm gonna jot that down so I don't forget, because that will be the first thing I do tomorrow morning.
And a county jail's handbook is typically not that big. It's not the same as the state.
Right. And they probably could send it over email or something.
Right.
I'm assuming. Okay.
You can do a FOIA request for it too. There's no reason why they wouldn't share that with you.
Yeah, I gotta check to see. There's a couple states I have FOIA'd, and you have to be a resident of the state. It's so annoying. New Hampshire, my home state, is one of them, and I'm like, I still have a New Hampshire area code, but my license does not reflect that. But let's end on Diddy, because there have been a lot of new civil lawsuits filed. Diddy's lawyers really want a gag order. Listen, I'm not opposed to that, because Jared, I've said I want this guy to get a fair trial, so he doesn't have anything to say. There should be no, you know what I mean? I want it to be fair and square. I did a live breaking down, and I'm hoping this didn't come off insensitive or like I'm trying to call anything, but one of the lawsuits, and this was the 13-year-old girl, which is awful. And I don't know who's in this chat that was on my live. Carrie, yes, Carrie, you were on it today. But we were going through the lawsuit and we were seeing where his house was. I found this New Jersey address. And so basically, just to give you guys an idea, after the VMAs in the year 2000, he had an after party and he had this mansion in New Jersey. The only on his background information, this program that I use, it had the address, and we looked it up, and it was a huge mansion, all the way back. You know what I'm talking about? Those neighborhoods, it's like very far back, and a gas station. It was about 50 minutes away, walking distance, if you had to walk, but it was like 5 minutes by car. So anyway, this 13-year-old girl, she's trying to get into the VMAs. She can't get in. She sees Diddy's limo driver. And he's like, well, you are like what Diddy's looking for. So if you want to meet me here after the VMAs in like 30 minutes, I'll take you to the after party. And she says, okay. It is interesting, Jarrett. And see, this is going to sound horrible, but I'm just going to say it. One limo driver is just going to take a random girl to New Jersey from the city. It sounds weird. Okay, fine. Please, guys, please don't be mad at me for this. I believe everybody, but there's a lot of lawsuits to go through, and a lot of these have very interesting details. And maybe it's 20 years. Maybe you don't remember everything. So it was a little strange that you've got a limo waiting outside. He's Diddy's driver, or maybe that was his job to go back and forth. I don't know. But she does talk about, what happened to her. And she said that he drove her to the party. Same MO. She sees celebrities everywhere. She has a drink. She feels woozy. She goes to lay down in a bedroom. Diddy comes in with celebrity A, female, celebrity B, male. She gets assaulted by celebrity B, the male, while celebrity A and Diddy hold her down. And then Diddy does the same. Then he tries to force her to do other things. She runs away naked, she says, holding her clothes. Apparently no one at the party cares. She runs outside and then she gets dressed. And then she stumbles her way 50 minutes to a gas station, apparently. Wow. If this is correct and the geography is correct. Either way, let's say this address is not correct. That area, it would take a good while to walk to a gas station. 13 years old. Yo, I was an idiot. I think I would have banged on the door, to the neighbors and asked to use the phone or even used a house phone in Diddy's house. So all of this is just really
well. And she, like so many of these victims, were disoriented. They were given an intoxicant. They were disoriented.
PhD, yeah.
So that throws common sense sometimes out the window, and even an ability to think rationally at that point. So she could have just headed in one direction 50 minutes and found her way to a gas station. But I think one of the questions I've been getting on these lawsuits is, why does it go through such great lengths to talk about his businesses and things of that nature? And the last thing we hear about are the facts of the actual assault. I think it's worth noting what they're doing, and what the attorneys are doing is, P. Diddy had all these businesses, and there's a concept called piercing the corporate veil, where if you incorporate, the thought is you're protecting yourself individually from a lawsuit, and you cannot be sued personally for the sins of your business or vice versa. What they're doing in those pages and pages of information are saying these businesses existed as tools in the trade of luring men and women to him. And they were actually part and parcel of the transaction of bringing these people to him and them being assaulted. So they're tying all of that together, because in the end, you will find that Diddy has money in all of these businesses tied up. They're going to try to make a claim on those monies. They have to tie it all together. Somebody kept saying, like, why is it all this stuff? Who cares? Somebody was raped. And I said, they're making a case to pierce the corporate veil.
Yes, definitely. And, it's the same as I went over the Abercrombie, Matt Jeffries indictment, same thing. It's like he used his businesses, and it's just terrible. But I think that, with a lot of these civil suits, they're so disturbing. And the fact that all of these celebrities are not being named, it has me really thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. And I made a speculation from the 13-year-old girl's lawsuit that possibly the female celebrity could be J-Lo, based on the fact that they were dating in September of 2000. They were at the VMAs together. But I obviously, that's, just a speculation. I don't want to accuse J-Lo of anything, but she has been brought up a number of times. And, I'm wondering if she's ever going to make a statement. If I were her, I probably wouldn't. I don't know what you think about that, but
Well, I don't know why there'd be. I know some celebrities have already cut deals, so they're asking this, but they're not staying out of this long. If this thing goes to a hearing or trial, they're coming out. Their names are coming out. Also, it's a shot across the bow. Here's how you fund these cases. So if you name these two celebrities, you're telling them we know who you are. Okay, your names are going to come out. The number of the lawyers right at the bottom of that document. It's like, call the office. You cut a deal, get yourself out of this mess on the civil.
Right.
Whether or not they're going to ultimately be held criminal responsible is another question.
Right, because Ariel Mitchell or Kid, or I'm sorry, I'm flip-flopping her name. She said on, I think the first time she was ever on News Nation with Laura Ingle, she said, we have this video of this very famous person. It's very obvious who it is. She said he might, or they might be even more high profile than Diddy. And we approached them about this. So I think this is already happening. And so, yeah, I just, you got to feel the lawsuits are terrifying. So like I said, this 13-year-old girl, she had some balls. She was brave. I mean, I was like, really? Like, I would be petrified wandering around in the dark for that long, if that's true. And then,
so imagine how horrifying what was going on inside if it was safer to go out into the dark.
Well, and also, like you said, you're very disoriented. You're like,
right.
But the other really insane lawsuit, and Ariel Mitchell Kidd, that's how her name is pronounced. She was questioned about this by Ashley Banfield because of some of the things in the lawsuit that one could say are questionable. But why? I am like, listen, it's weird, but I believe her. She names herself. She wants a jury trial. Why would she lie when she wants a jury trial and her name is on there? And this is the lawsuit where she alleges she was gang raped, and Diddy had a knife and said, if you don't comply, I'll give you a Glasgow smile. All because she said she thought he was involved in Tupac's murder. Right. So this one it's bad. And then basically,
I mean, millions of people have said that. It's like,
right, exactly. It's like, really? But no, what Ashley was questioning Ariel Mitchell Kidd on was the fact that after this awful ordeal happened, where she was allegedly gang raped and there was objects involved, and it was just, God, it was horrible, guys. If you read this, it's so triggering. It's so sad. And she actually goes and depicts what happens afterwards, where she is telling Diddy, how could you do that to me? And he FaceTimes his mother, and his mother says, you better not call the cops, take the money that he's offering you, all this stuff. They get in a fight. She had been hiding a kitchen knife or something that she grabbed from the kitchen on the way out. And Tom Smith is here. Hey, Tom. So when she is outside and they're struggling, she ends up, knifing him. The cops actually come, and she says they don't help her. They don't take her to the hospital. So she goes back after she sees Diddy speed away. She goes back to the house where this alleged incident occurred, and she sleeps it off. And so Banfield was like, why would she do that? You got to explain this to all of us, because we're really trying to understand. And what Mitchell Kidd said was just like, listen, I can't explain it to you. I mean, if you haven't been in that situation, you don't know what you're going to do.
It's actually a great answer.
It's a great answer. That's my whole point. It's so great. Yeah. So.
Well, I think, look, there's so much more to come out. I don't know if there's anything left of, if in fact there's any hope of these folks getting money. Diddy's finances are right now the subject of dozens of lawsuits and a huge federal forfeiture. So, I mean, he's going to end up straight up penniless. So, when this is all said and done, I only hope that these folks, money is the only thing. I tell clients that too. It's like, the only thing I could offer you, outside of prosecuting and putting someone away in the
Hmm.
civil realm is money, and you
Yeah.
say, oh, it's all about money. It's the only thing we can do in that
Mm.
part of the business. So, I hope there's something these folks can get and have, a share of these funds and do something positive for themselves. So,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, we will. And sometimes, and I know this probably sounds weird and might come off, I don't know. Sometimes I just like to say what I'm thinking, and sometimes I regret it. But
Uh-oh.
so no, I guess I just mean like some of these lawsuits, while they're disturbing, and I'm sure I can't imagine if it happened to me, but some of them are like alleging gang rape, and some of them are alleging he grabbed my junk. So it's like, how do you determine, I guess, the monetary value that one can
Well,
get,
believe it
right?
or not, I mean, well, obviously, somebody being gang raped has a profound, more damaging effect than someone being grabbed
That's
physically.
what I'm
First of
thinking.
all,
That's what I'm thinking.
physically. First
So
of all, secondly, it's not. I've had cases against the churches, the
uh-huh.
Southern Baptist churches. I had cases against the Catholic Church, and the level of abuse physically is certainly considered in establishing a value in the courts. And then the
Yeah.
level of physical damage, not to get too deep in the weeds on this,
Yeah.
and psychological damage. And that's not to downplay somebody being grabbed, but being grabbed and a gang rape are in the realm of assaults are pretty diametrically opposed things.
Right.
So,
And being grabbed is jarring. It's probably
right,
horrifying because you think
right.
something else is going to happen after and you get away. So we're not discounting that. I'm just trying to figure out, what do you get? Like, I guess money wise, how is that determined in court? I don't know. I'm just,
It all depends on if, for example, if you come in and say, somebody grabbed me, I've been depressed since I was a teenager, but you never got any care, doesn't have
mm,
any value. If you say, I
oh,
was grabbed
oh,
at the age of 15, I started seeing a psychiatrist, I have clinical depression since then, I see them every week, different case.
that's a really
So,
good
and that
point.
has tremendous value. So, look, if anybody's out there though and is suffering anything of that kind, I'm always happy to talk through something like that with our listeners and viewers.
That's really nice. And that's a really good point, Jared. I'm sure when these lawyers like Busby was looking through these suits and the plaintiffs say, this caused me emotional distress and I've never been the same," I would think, and let me know if you agree with that they've looked through medical records and they've seen records of them visiting a therapist and possibly
Oh, yeah, and
yeah.
believe me, if you didn't do that, if you
Hmm.
didn't get treatment, it crushes the value of your case. I do
Okay.
that. I do personal injury litigation. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not enough to say your back hurts. You gotta go to the chiropractor, it's just the way it is. And
Right.
because look, I mean, you're talking about an insurance company letting go of their money. You
Yeah.
better have a reason. And that's why, and it avoids people, unjustified lawsuits too. So anyway, I
Yeah.
think that these cases, though, there is a continuum of value. Um, not to, but it's about money. And on that, I promise that horrific gang rape, I am
Oh.
sure has tremendous value because of the damages there. I mean,
Mm.
if there's anything left of Diddy's estate after that case, I'd be
Dude, right? I mean, that one, God. For me, Cassie's was so horrific, and I read that one, and they're all horrific, but there's just certain ones that you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that is
it was, and it
horribly.
was written in a way, it was pretty graphic. But I just think this is every week you're going to have new Diddy information.
Yes, I mean, 120 new clients, and we've got six, seven that came out, and it's just, and there seems to be Busby, Wigder, and Ariel Mitchell Kidd so far are the attorneys that are putting these forth. So, but anyway, my throat hurts, so I think that we should
Get
stop.
some rest. You'll be happy to know I spoke at the Pennsylvania State Police Academy today, and I have a new part of my presentation with a picture of Michael Proctor in it. So,
Stop it. We did get to read. There you go. Wait, shut
so
up. Really?
the
Good for you.
warning again, yeah. So, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
Guys, let's we should get back on some read stuff. We could catch up on a lot for next week. There's a lot going on. So let's do that next week, guys. I feel
Yeah,
like
there's nothing else going on in this country over the next 2 weeks, so I'm sure the Karen
oh
Reed.
wait, isn't the presidential election or something?
Yeah, there might be.
No. Karen Reed, John O'Keefe. We're talking about that. Oh no, Mom, I'm not really sick. I promise. I'm going to see my mom this weekend, and she hates when I'm sick. She hates, Mom, I'm really not sick. I'm fine. Okay. Anyway, all right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Good night, Jarrett, and good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them